Hi guys, welcome back to another video. In our last video I showed you how to draft this two color blazer with mesh, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to cut and sew this blazer. If it's something you're interested in, then keep watching this video. In the last video I showed you how to properly cut it out with your pattern paper, and this is what we had. I'm going to be using it to cut on our fabric. So we're going to start with the white part of this jacket, which is the upper part, and then we'll move on to the lower part. For the fabric to use, the best fabric to use for this kind of blazer is crepe fabric, a crepe that is not too thick and at the same time not too light. And I would advise that for your black and white fabric, or whichever color you're using, it should be about the same texture. So we're going to be using a crepe fabric, we're going to be using suit lining and also stay to interface everything, and then our mesh for the middle part of this jacket. So let's cut the first part of this jacket. When you're cutting an outfit that has so many pieces, the best way to cut on your fabric is to arrange it the way it is going to look like. So I just arranged my back in one side, the back pattern in one side, and the front in the other side. The reason why I did not add the lapel side is because this fabric I'm cutting on, I added my lining to it so it can be fast. I folded my lining with my crepe, and then your lapel does not need a lining. It doesn't need like a suit lining. You're going to use the actual material to interface or to line your lapel, so that by the time you fold it out, it will be the material front and back. I hope you understand what I said. Now, since there was no allowance on the pattern we drafted, I'm going to be putting the allowance on the fabric. So any part that is going to be stitched together at the middle, I'm going to leave half an inch, but any part that is the side, that is the joining of the side, so the side back and the side front, I'm going to leave 1 inch at the side as your allowance, while the middle part I'm going to leave half an inch for joining allowance, because we don't need so much to join these pieces together. But if you want to leave more, it's actually a thing of choice. So after leaving this allowance, just make sure you cut it out properly. And don't forget, if you're cutting your pieces, you're cutting it on a fold, because this pattern is just for one side of the back and one side of the front. And we're going to also have the other side, so you cut on fold. Now we'll go ahead to cut our lapel. So like I said before, I did not cut the lapel with that fabric because it had lining on it, and our lapel does not need suit lining but crepe all through. So I'm just leaving half an inch all around the lapel. Just make sure you fold your fabric twice, so you have 4 pieces of lapel, so 2 for left part and 2 for the right part. 1 is going to serve as your lining, and then you leave half an inch allowance all through and cut out neatly. After cutting out, remember we notched our pattern paper where the collar and the lapel meet. You are going to transfer that notch to your fabric so you can know when you are stitching your collar, and then we'll go ahead and cut out our collar. You just leave half an inch, round it and cut. When you are cutting, don't forget to also notch, just like you notched on your lapel, notch the part that is on the paper. That's where the lapel and the collar will meet. Transfer it from the paper also to the fabric. This is because we don't want to get confused when you are joining your collar to your lapel. You know the exact part to start from. Now we are done with cutting the upper part of this jacket, which is the white part. We're going to move along to cut the lower part, which is the black part of this jacket. I already interfaced the lining and the fabric with stay, so to make it easier for me. If you can't do this, or you feel like it's going to waste your stay, then just cut out before you infuse your stay. So this is everything I have for my black piece, and just like I did for the white piece, I'm going to arrange this pattern the way it is going to look like if I were to draft a pattern. I'm just going to arrange it well. I'm cutting the back different from the front because the back is a little longer, so just to save my fabric, I added 3 inches allowance to this under, because I realized that I want my jacket to be longer, so 1 inch for folding in and then 2 inches more to this. But if you're okay with the initial length, just leave it like that. So like I said before, wherever you have your side at where you're joining the 2 jackets together, you leave 1 inch because you need more allowance there. And then for the middle, where you're joining the pieces together, the middle part, you can just leave half an inch because you don't need so much allowance there. So I'm just marking and cutting out, and this was quite difficult to cut because I was cutting 4 layers of fabric. Then I went ahead to cut the side of the front. I didn't add the center front because just like we did for our lapel, it's an extension of the lapel. It doesn't need a suit lining. It actually needs 4 pieces of crepe fabric. 2 would act as lining and then 2 as the main fabric. I added the 2 inches allowance, hem allowance that I added for the back. Remember, we made the jacket 2 inches longer and then 1 inch for hem allowance. And I just went ahead to cut it. The next part we are going to cut is our mesh. And this mesh is like the most technical part of this jacket I'm going to see. There are 3 options for this mesh because we're going to use this mesh for both the jacket and the lining. There are different methods, but this is the easiest. I felt like everybody was going to learn faster. So now you have the option of either using your mesh as your main middle as well as your fabric. So that means your mesh is going to be doubled, or you can use normal mesh like black net, tulle net, the one that is not too soft. Use it as a lining and use this corset mesh as your main fabric for the middle, or you can just go ahead and use tulle mesh for both your fabric and your middle if you want it to be very, very transparent. Now you have the option of not sewing these 2 pieces together, like cutting it separately and sewing it together. What you would just do is the side part of this mesh and the center part, just put it together with a tape. The pattern paper, just put it together with a tape so that we can cut it as one instead of cutting it as 2 different pieces, just to save time and to make your work neater. What you want to focus on is making sure this jacket is really neat. Go ahead and pin down the paper on your fabric. You're folding your mesh into 4. So once you fold into 2, you fold it again, because we are cutting 4 pieces of this mesh for our lining and the front part of the jacket. Before we cut out this piece with our allowance, I want us to create our boning channels or casing so that we can just see it and know the part you are going to put your casing. So from the main jacket, you see that it has about 4 bonings on one side, 4 boning channels on one side. So we are creating one is going to be at the edge, that's where the center front is. Another one is going to be where your dart was supposed to be. You know, we closed up our dart. And then for the third one, you are going to take from your dart to the side of this piece and then divide it into 2. Whatever you get, you're going to take it as your third boning channel. You can decide to have more if you want, but we're having 4 pieces of channel for this jacket. Now mark that part as your third channel, and then the last channel is going to be the side of this jacket. So complete, it's 4 pieces complete. And now you go ahead to leave your allowance on your mesh. Remember, 1 inch for the side of your mesh or more if you are using more allowance, and then ½ an inch at the other side, and then you just cut it out. After cutting it out, now the next thing you want to do is make sure you notch everywhere this casing is going to be, your boning casing is going to be, so that you are not going to make mistake or your work is not going to be neat. So just notch every part. We have 4 boning casings, so notch the 4 parts at the upper part of this mesh and notch the lower part of this mesh, so you will not struggle or have difficulty when you are putting your boning. At this point, we have all our pieces ready. They are all cut and interfaced. Make sure you interface every piece you are going to use for this jacket, both the lining and the main fabric. So now we'll go ahead to cut our sleeve for this jacket. I have to show you how to cut the sleeve. So this is just a basic sleeve I'm cutting. I used 5 inches for the cap height because it's a suit, and then 8 inches is the arm side for this jacket. Then I divided this arm side into 3 equal parts. The first part I'm coming up by ½ an inch, and the last part I'm coming in by ½ an inch, and then you just connect the lines together. At the elbow part I'm coming in by ½ an inch, and at the wrist part I'm coming in by 1 inch. If you want a detailed tutorial for sleeve, just let me know, but this is just a basic sleeve I'm drafting. But I did not make the elbow and the wrist part tight because it's a suit. When you are done, just cut out your basic pattern the way you draft your basic sleeve pattern. But remember that we added our shoulder pad allowance, that's what I'll call it. We raised our shoulder by about 0.6, just exactly how our shoulder pad was when we were drafting our pattern. You're going to do the exact same thing on your sleeve because you are joining the sleeve to the shoulder. So I just added a piece of paper at the top of this sleeve and then added the 0.6 inches on our main pattern for our shoulder pad on the sleeve. Just draw a line that would connect it and then cut it out. That's what you do after drafting your basic sleeve. Make sure you add the shoulder pad allowance. Then to separate our white parts from our black part for the sleeve, just watch closely what I'm doing. You want to tape the bodies, this part of the bodies and the sleeve together. That's what you use to determine which part to be white and which part to be black. After taping it the exact way I'm doing, you just draw a straight line like this, because this part of the bodice we put is the white part. So arrange it like this, the exact way, tape it down and cut it out. Automatically that upper part becomes your white part also, and the lower part becomes your black part. The reason why we did this is to make sure our sleeve color aligns with the jacket. You want to make sure everything aligns and is neat. That's the whole purpose of doing a two-color jacket. Now for the sleeve, I'm cutting it on our main fabric. The black part, I'm just adding half an inch allowance at the upper part, 1 inch allowance at the side to join, and then I'm adding 1 inch allowance under because I'm going to be folding the hem. Now I'm going to cut the white part, the same thing, just add half an inch allowance at the under part, 1 inch allowance at the side to join, and half an inch at the top part. This is it for our sleeve. We are done with cutting our sleeve. Then you cut the exact same thing on your lining. For the black part, you use your black lining, and for the white part, you use your white lining because you want it to be neat. For the hem of the sleeve, since I'm folding in with 1 inch, I'm going to remove that 1 inch from the lining so that it's going to be neat when we are done with sewing. So I'm removing 1 inch from the lining because I added 1 inch to the main fabric. That is it for cutting the sleeves. We have the sleeves, the upper part and the lower part, and we also have the lining. The next thing we are going to do now is to start pinning down and sewing. Like I said before, make sure every part of your fabric is interfaced so that it can come out well and really neat. Now, just like I did when I was cutting, I'm going to arrange this jacket the way I'm going to arrange these pieces the way it would be when I'm sewing it, so that I can pin it down correctly. If you're working with so many pieces, this is the best way to join, so you will not make mistake and join a different part to a different part. It can be very frustrating, so you should do this. Make sure you pin it down the way you would envision the jacket would look, and then take it to your machine and sew. You also need to stitch down your collar. You're going to stitch the straight part and the lower part and stop exactly where you notched. After stitching it down, this is what it's going to look like. Make sure you iron it properly because ironing is one of the major parts in making this jacket. So after that, I'm just going to join the two colors together. There are different ways to do this, but this is the method I use. I'm going to join the two colors together and make sure the same aligns. After pinning down, just sew a straight line on it. After joining all your pieces together, because you're going to take it to your machine, do just the way I showed you to pin down and sew everything. It's going to be a lot of sewing, but just persevere. Then you're going to go ahead to iron. Ironing is the most important part of this jacket making, so it will look neat and to not just look rough as you are sewing it. So iron every piece, the seam, iron it flat. Every part of this jacket, make sure you iron it flat, including the collar. You open up the seam and press it and iron it very, very well. You see the way I'm stressing iron. No. So you're going to iron the collar properly, both the inner part and the outer part, and then the lining. Don't forget to iron your linings also. So after that, the next thing we want to work on is our mesh. Now remember, we have 4 pieces of mesh and we notch where we're going to do our casing. So depends on the kind of boning you want to use. You can either use a sewable boning or a non-sewable boning, but make sure your boning is not too strong for comfortability. I am making use of a sewable boning for this particular jacket. For the casing, you cut it out according to the way your boning is, because you want your boning to be really firm inside it. For this boning I'm using, I think I cut out about 1.5 inch of casing. I cut about 4 pieces because we have 4 different parts to put our boning, and I'm just measuring how long I want my boning to be. After that, I folded and cut out 8 pieces of this boning that I'm going to be putting on the mesh part of this jacket. I'm so excited about this jacket. Then you go ahead to cover this upper and lower part, the tips of your boning, because you don't want it to be uncomfortable when you use it. So I'm covering it with a paper tape, and then I'm just marking down where I notch, just to make it very visible when I'm putting in my boning and the boning channel. I marked it for the 2 parts, and I'm just going to show you how you are going to sew this. So once you fold your sewable boning into it like this, you are going to place it on that line, pin it down, sew on top, and then fold it and sew. It's easy. I'm sure you know how to fix boning channels by now. When you are done with that, you can go ahead and iron. Make sure you press it properly, both the front and the back, so that it can look very, very neat. Now we have the 4 parts of our mesh, the 2 for the lining and then the 2 for the actual jacket that has the boning channels. I am going to go ahead to start joining all our pieces of this jacket. For the back, I'm joining the upper and the lower part together. Make sure when you are pinning down, the seams are lined. That's like the most important part, just to make sure your work is neat. Even for the front part, make sure everything aligns. So now I'm going to show you how to join the mesh to the actual jacket. This is the lapel, which is the upper part of the jacket. You're just going to place it seam to seam. You know, we had our dart that we covered, so this casing now is going to be our dart. Now make sure it aligns with the upper part of the dart. So what you want to do is that as the dart is coming down, make sure it touches one of the boning channels, which was originally our dart. Then you go ahead to join the lower part, which is the black piece, to the mesh, just like you did for the upper part. Make sure the dart aligns from the upper part to the mesh and to the lower part of this jacket for neatness sake. And then you do the same thing for the lining. It's just that lining doesn't have boning cases. Still make sure it aligns when you are pinning it down. After pinning down, this is what it's going to look like. This is what the lining looks like, and this is what the main fabric, the front of the jacket looks like. Now just take it to your machine and sew down all your pieces the way you have pinned down, and then when you are done, you start ironing again. For this is, I'm ironing the sleeve right now. I joined the upper part of the sleeve to the lower part and open the seam to iron. Always open your seam to iron. For the back part, you need to look at this part closely. So when you're ironing your back part, open the seam. Make sure you iron it and it is very flat. But for the front part, don't open the seam when you are ironing. The reason is because you don't want your seam to be visible at the front of this mesh since it's transparent. So don't do it the way you did the back part. When you're ironing the front, just iron it upwards and then the lower part downwards. You don't want any seam showing through your mesh. Do the same thing for the front part of this jacket. When you are ironing, don't forget, don't open your seam for the front part. When you're ironing the mesh part, just iron it flat the way it is looking like this, and then we go ahead to start joining our pieces, the front to the back. When you are joining, take note, make sure your seam aligns, because why I'm stressing on this is because you don't want to finish and you see that your white part, the white part of your jacket is longer or is not aligned with the back part of the jacket. So make sure the seam aligns everywhere, from your shoulder, when you are joining your shoulder, to the sides of the jacket. Make sure everything aligns so that you can get the whole two-color effect and you'll be happy with your result. After joining, I brought it back to iron. I've already joined it. I brought it back to iron. I'm opening the seam to iron, but I am trimming the part where the mesh is. I just trimmed a little so that when you turn it to the front, it's not going to be so visible. You would also iron the front part of this jacket. After ironing the lining, make sure you press it down very well. You're going to iron the front part of this jacket, and just like you did for the lining part, you know, we cut out a bit of this mesh part so it won't be visible at the front. You do the same for this front part. So once you cut it out, you are just going to cut it out to where your casing is, so that the remaining allowance can hide behind your boning channel. And when you turn it to the front, you are not going to be seeing any visible seam at the front of your mesh, just to make sure it's neat. I hope you understand what I mean. This is what it's going to look like. If you have questions or you don't understand, ask in the comment section. Now, after joining and ironing, we're going to go ahead to join our collar to the front part of this jacket, not the lining. You are joining the collar to the major fabric, that's the main fabric of this jacket. And when you are doing this, you want to make sure your seams also align. So where we notched, you are going to pin it down to also where we notch at the collar, and then you are going to just pin down the midpoint of the collar to the midpoint of this jacket, and then just pin down the remaining part. Make sure it sits well before you take it to your machine to sew. If you are sewing it, you're going to use very tiny, maybe 1/4 of an inch to sew, because this is just me attaching the collar to the major fabric. You're not sewing it down. You're going to use the lining to cover it. So just make sure you sew with very little inch when you are joining this. This is what it would look like after sewing by maybe 1/4 of an inch. And then the next thing we're going to do is join our lining to our main jacket. I am just removing about 1 to 1.5 inches at the lower part of the lining, because just like we did for the sleeve, we are folding the hem of this jacket towards the lining. Now before we join our lining to the main part of this jacket, you are going to attach your sleeve. You are attaching the lining of your sleeve to the lining of the jacket. Just pin down, especially if you are a beginner. I would advise you to always pin down. It's going to help you to avoid unnecessary mistakes. So once you pin down, you go to your machine and sew it together, and this is what it's going to look like. Then go ahead and stitch the longer part of the sleeve. When you are stitching this down or pinning it down, make sure the black part aligns, and then you take it to your machine after pinning down to sew both sides. This is what it would look like after you have sewn, and then you're going to do the same thing for the main part of this jacket. And I know we have done a lot of iron in this video, but we are not done. We're going to go ahead to open the sleeves and iron to make it neat. This is what the main part looks like, and this is what the lining of the jacket will look like. We are now going to join the lining and the main fabric together. From the collar, the midpoint of the collar, we're going to pin down the main fabric to the lining. And remember, we used 1/4 of an inch to join the collar to the main fabric. We are now going to use the real 1/2 inch to join the lining to the main fabric. Just make sure everything aligns. The part you notched, make sure the part you notched, that's the part you are pinning down to the part you notch on the lining. The long and short of the story is that every part of this jacket, all your lines should just be together and be arranged so that your finished look is going to be cute. When you are done pinning the upper part of this jacket, you go ahead to the lower part. Remember, our lining is now shorter than the main fabric because we are folding the hem, but you are just going to pin down the lower parts like that. Don't bother about the length difference. Just make sure all the seams are aligned when you're pinning down. For sewing, you are going to sew the upper part first. So you see where the collar is, you are going to sew straight like this, round from the neckline to the lapel edge. That's where we're going to sew, and then we're going to sew down. When you're done, just bring it back, remove your pins like I'm doing. I finished sewing the upper part and I've sewn the lower part of this jacket. Next, we are going to join the center front of this jacket down. So this part, just straighten it. You know, one part is bigger than one, the front part is longer than the back. Just straighten it to form the hem for the front and then pin it down. So for this lapel part, there's a trick I normally use just to make sure my lapel comes out like really pointy. I don't have to start piercing something to bring out my lapel. I just fold thread, make a really thick layer of thread, not very thick, and put it at the corner of the lapel, that pointed edge, and just pin down. That's what I do. I think I've done a tutorial like that on my Instagram. So take it to your machine and close up every part of this jacket. The only thing that will be left to be your sleeve. But before we join our sleeve, we are going to have to fix our shoulder pad. Now you are just going to fold your shoulder pad and get the midpoint of your shoulder pad on both sides, and then we are fixing our shoulder pad to the lining of this jacket. So just watch how closely how I'm doing it. The center where you notched, you are going to pin it down to the edge of your shoulder on your seam line, and then the other part that is also notched, you are going to pin it on the other part of your shoulder, just the way you fix a shoulder pad. If you look closely, you'll be able to get it. So you just arrange it and make sure it's very balanced, and then pin the two edges together. So now you have 4 parts to tack on this shoulder part: the midpoint, the 2 midpoints, and the 2 edges. You're just going to use your thread and needle to tack it firm in a way that is not going to pull off. And this is what you have after tacking the 2 shoulder parts on your lining. This is what it's going to look like. Now the next thing you want to do is join your sleeves together. So take note, when you are joining your sleeves together, you need to be careful so you don't join it wrongly. Just watch how I'm doing it and you are going to make no mistakes. So just spread out your sleeves, the 2 sleeves together like this. Make sure it aligns, where the seam is aligned with each other. And then next thing you want to do is pick it up and stitch it in a way that it is facing each other like this. So it's just like handshake. Let the 2 mouths face each other, and then you just pin down like that. That's how to fix your sleeves together when you are fixing it inside. So you just make sure the right side is facing the right side, and then you pin the wrong side together. Then take it to your machine and stitch up that place by 1/2 inch. After stitching it up, this is what your sleeve is going to look like. You remove your pin, and this is what you have properly stitched. Now the next thing we're going to do is remove a bit of this mesh at the middle part. because while we are doing this, we don't want the mesh to show when we have turned our jacket. We want it to be neat, so just trim it a bit to the size of the casing. Then you go ahead to notch around your collar so that when you turn it, it's going to be really flat. After that, you just make a small space inside the jacket, somewhere that is hidden, that is not too obvious. Make a small space inside the jacket and turn your jacket inside out. When you are done turning it, at the lapel where we kept this thread, what you need to do is pull on this thread really hard, and then it's going to bring out the pointed lapel look without having to pierce in something to bring it out. That's what I do to make sure lapel or pointed corners are easy for me to sew. So the jacket is 95% ready, but what we need to do now is to iron this jacket. Like, iron it like your life depends on it. You're going to iron every single corner of this jacket to make sure it is flat before we take the next step that we are about to take. After you've made sure your jacket is properly ironed, the next thing we want to do is hold down our mesh together. We are going to hold down the mesh of the outer part and the lining of this jacket together, because we don't want it to be free from each other when you are wearing. So just like I'm doing, you're going to pin down the upper part of this jacket and the lower part at the mesh area. Make sure the seams are aligned when you're pinning down. You're also going to pin down the side, and then you're going to take it to your machine and sew the four corners. So you're sewing the upper part, the black line, the line where the white and black is joining. You're going to sew the side, same side. You're going to sew the lower part and the center part of this jacket. What we're trying to do is just make sure we hold the two mesh together so that it can be firm. When you are sewing this jacket, just make sure you are not in a hurry. Settle down to sew. Where you need to use your black thread, use it. Where you need to use your white thread, use it. And you would love how neat it would come out when you are done. Now we are going to go ahead to fix our hook and eye, and you can put either the hook or the eye on any part of the jacket you want. This particular jacket is going to take about 4 hook and eye. So for me to distribute it evenly, I put one at the upper part and then put one at the lower part, and the one at the middle I just gave a space of 1/68 each. Just make sure it's arranged when you are putting this hook and eye, and then you place it on it and sew it. When you are sewing, make sure you sew it firm in a way that the thread is going to go through the boning case under at least once and come up. That's just it. Sewing the hook and eye, I don't think it's going to be very difficult, but if you have questions about it, you can definitely ask me. We're finally done with this jacket. I'm so excited. You can give it one more last good pressing and your jacket is ready. Let me know what you think. Did you follow this tutorial from beginning to end? If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. Don't forget to share this video to others. It may be helpful to drop a lovely comment and subscribe. If you have any questions or any part that is confusing, let me know. And also if you have video suggestions. See you in my next video. Bye.